Ukraine's foreign minister pays a visit to China. Beijing brokers a supposed unity deal between rival Palestinian factions. And now the CCP is making demands of the US related to nuclear policy. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell, and I have some exciting news. We're at nearly 2 million subscribers, only about 40,000 more to go. So if you're watching and you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button now. When we get to 2 million, we'll do a special live stream for you where we'll do something we've never done before. So again, hit that subscribe button. And now, on with the show. So let's start with something nice and light. The Russia-Ukrainian war. As we speak, the Ukrainian foreign minister is in Beijing urging direct peace talks between Ukraine and Russia to end the war, although he suggested that Russia wasn't yet ready to do so. I assume all the tanks and explosions were kind of a dead giveaway about that. China has tried to paint itself as a potential neutral mediator in the war, despite its no-limits partnership with Russia and refusal to condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The West has accused China of supplying the Russian army with dual-use items and parts to help it in the war effort, which the CCP predictably denied. Ukraine has been trying to encourage the Chinese Communist Party to engage in international peace conferences regarding the war, but the results so far have been lackluster. Meanwhile, the no-limits partners are pairing up to push back against U.S. warnings over military and economic forays in the melting Arctic. In recent years, Russia has increased its military presence in the Arctic Ocean, while the CCP has labeled itself a near-Arctic state and increased funding for polar exploration and research. Yep, not even polar bears are safe from the threat of Chinese invaders. Indeed, Canada and the U.S., along with other Western countries that either border the Arctic or have interests there, have grown concerned about Russian and Chinese influence in the North Pole. Putin and Xi are both definitely on Santa's naughty list, despite all of the toys probably being made in China. The U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense said that we've seen growing cooperation between the PRC and Russia in the Arctic commercially, with the PRC being a major funder of Russian energy exploration in the Arctic. And China is even taking part in extensive oil and gas pipeline construction from Russia through China, which could positively impact its Belt and Road Initiative. These two countries have even held joint military drills near Alaska, which is a much different type of drilling than Alaska's used to. But that's nothing. Yesterday, the U.S. military even intercepted Chinese and Russian aircraft, including nuclear-capable bombers near Alaska, while noting that they did stay in international airspace. All of that has the U.S. and its allies just a teensy bit worried, so they're pushing back against both Moscow and Beijing. Canada even has planned to quadruple the size of its submarine fleet, purchasing 12 subs capable of operating under sea ice. Do you know how much of a jerk you have to be to piss off Canada? You could slap the Tim Hortons coffee out of their hands and say Wayne Gretzky was overrated, and they'd still just say sorry. But China has been busy. China hosted the rival Palestinian factions Hamas and Fatah and says that it got them to sign a pact to end their rift and form an interim unity government. This is the second time China has hosted such talks. The first round was unsuccessful, and a second effort initially failed to materialize after political infighting, but was ultimately rescheduled. Who would have thought Hamas would be disagreeable and unreliable? But according to the CCP, China has made some headway. China's state-run media has called the agreement the Beijing Declaration. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who was involved in these talks, said that the core achievement is to make it clear that the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, is the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, and reiterated the importance of a two-state solution to the Middle East conflict. Because if anyone would be an authority on respecting a nation's boundaries, it's China. But given the rocky history between Hamas and Fatah, as well as the ongoing war in Gaza, it's uncertain whether the Beijing Declaration will have any real lasting impact on Palestinian or Middle Eastern politics. More likely, the whole thing is just a show to bolster China's international image and challenge U.S. and Western global political dominance, just like China's claim to be a neutral arbiter in Ukraine. And after the break, could talks between China and the Philippines have worked out after all? Welcome back. China is making nuclear weapons demands of the West. Last week, China suspended arms control talks with the U.S. over its military aid to Taiwan. Now, China is saying it wants the U.S. to end its nuclear umbrella over its Asian and European allies, and adopt a no first use policy, meaning the U.S. wouldn't be able to initiate a nuclear attack, at least in theory. On Monday, China's foreign ministry published 2 working papers regarding the no first use policy and nuclear security assurances. In one of the papers, China advocated a no first use of nuclear weapons initiative and called on the rest of the P5 nuclear powers, the US, the UK, Russia, and France, to follow its step to publicly promise not to be the first to use nuclear weapons at any time and under any circumstance. The working paper then went on to encourage the P5 to negotiate and conclude a treaty with unlimited duration on the matter, warning of the disaster to humanity that a nuclear war could cause. But it did say that any party could withdraw if extraordinary events have jeopardized the supreme interests of its country. In the other working paper, China said nuclear sharing and extended deterrence have diminished the willingness of non-nuclear states participating in arrangements to build nuclear weapon-free zones, or conclude an international legal instrument on security assurances. And it encouraged the relevant nuclear weapon state, i.e. America, to abandon its nuclear sharing policies and withdraw overseas deployed nukes. This is all pretty odd, since Western reports indicate that China is expanding its nuclear arsenal, the size of which has never been disclosed. Plus, China has refused to condemn Russia's deployment of nukes in neighboring Belarus while it invades Ukraine. But this is pretty typical communist narrative warfare. Either make it seem like the P5 are the aggressors for not limiting their nuclear capabilities, or get them to handicap themselves while China advances its own nuclear program as it gears up for an invasion of Taiwan. But China did apparently reach a deal with the Philippines that could potentially end clashes in the South China Sea. China claims the Second Thomas Shoal, which is in Filipino waters. And there have been numerous clashes between the Philippines and China that have gotten increasingly aggressive, which could ultimately draw in the Philippines' treaty ally, the U.S. 2 Filipino officials who had knowledge of the negotiations confirmed the deal to the Associated Press on the condition of anonymity, and the government later issued a brief statement minus any details. Neither China nor the Philippines have released the text of the deal. China's foreign ministry did announce shortly after midnight on Sunday that they discussed with the Philippines managing the situation and reached a provisional agreement with the Philippines on humanitarian resupply of living necessities, which likely means the Sierra Madre, an old World War II-era warship the Philippines ran aground on the Second Thomas Shoal and has kept troops stationed there. For its part, the Philippines Department of Foreign Affairs released a statement saying both sides continue to recognize the need to de-escalate the situation in the South China Sea and manage differences through dialogue and consultation, and agree that the agreement will not prejudice each other's positions in the South China Sea. But given that the deal leaves territorial disputes unresolved, who knows how long that will be the case. And finally, China is raising its retirement age amidst an aging population. The decision comes after an important economic meeting last week called the Three Plenum, held by top CCP officials. It also comes as China's birth rate continues to decline and as life expectancy has risen above even that of the US. Unless you speak out against the Chinese Communist Party, of course. At the time of the Communist Revolution in 1949, life expectancy in the country was just 36 years. Now it's 78. But China's retirement age is one of the world's lowest, at just 60 for men and 55 for women in white-collar jobs. Working-class women can retire at 50. The decision comes after a 2019 report from China's Academy of Social Sciences, which said the country's pension fund would run dry by 2035. But that was before the pandemic, zero COVID. And a host of other recent issues slammed the economy, so it's probably going to come even sooner. It remains to be seen whether or not this move will do anything to help the Chinese economy, which has, let's put it this way, a ton of other problems holding it back. And now, it's time for me to respond to a question or comment from the China Uncensored 50-cent army, fans who make this show possible by supporting it on patreon.com/China Uncensored. And today's question comes from No Mojo. China is a communist country in name only. It is actually a brutal totalitarian state. The ethos of communism is from those according to their means to those according to their needs. That is definitely not China. I get that question a lot, No Mojo. Is China communist? Is it a brutal totalitarian state? ¿Por qué no los dos? You see, on paper, communism sounds very altruistic. Really, if you want to understand communism, listen to John Lennon's Imagine. He himself describes it as basically the Communist Manifesto. And it sounds nice. A utopia where everyone gets along. Where do I sign up? But how do you make that utopia possible? Well, as Marx said, through the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions, which means violence. So when Lenin, John that is, sings "Imagine no possessions, no religion, no countries," how does that happen? How do you get people to give up their possessions, their religion, their country? You have to force them. And it turns out the people who are very okay with killing people and taking their stuff aren't always the most altruistic when they come to power. If you want to know more about how communism takes over a society, and especially their use of useful idiots, check out this video from my new show, Deep Thoughts While Gaming, where I hide from YouTube censorship bots controversial conversations in gaming content. This one is about how the blue creatures from Avatar are actually dirty reds. Thanks for your question, No Mojo, and click that orange button to join my China Uncensored 50-cent army on Patreon. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.